The Connection Show, inspiring hope, health, and healing. Sponsored by Braveheart Workshops Live with Jill Reynolds. And joining me in San Marcos, California at the General Flynn ReAwaken Tour with Clay Clark is the amazing Ian Smith. Welcome, Ian.
Thank you very much for having me.
Well, I'm excited because I got to meet you in Dallas and saw you in Phoenix, and you just inspire me, Ian.
Thank you.
One of the things that we do on the Connection Show, which is a little bit different than the other podcasters, is we really believe that when Jesus walked on the face of the earth, Ian, he shared accounts, parables, and stories for the purpose of transformation in other people's lives. Mm-hmm. And so through that, I've been inspired by God when I do my interviews to ask my guests if they're willing to share the good, the bad, and the ugly parts of their childhood from being little, and how that good, bad, and ugly evolved and transformed them into the amazing people they are today. So if you wouldn't mind, would you mind sharing about little Ian growing up and what your life looked like, little Ian?
Well, so I grew up in a single-parent household. I grew up with my mother, who, we were from the city of Philadelphia, relatively low-income family. My mom had me at an early age, and she decided that she did not want me to grow up in that environment. She wanted something better for me. So she worked really, really hard, and we moved over into this little sleepy suburb of New Jersey in a very, very humble little house that I actually live in today. All of 800 square feet, just a little tiny. It's that first house my mom bought, and now I live in it, generation later. And I was very well provided for. My mom worked extremely, extremely hard. She put herself through school. She worked full time. Thankfully, my grandmother was around, so I was raised by some very hardworking and incredible women who stepped up to the plate when there were no men in my life to provide, the things that they were supposed to. So my mom was not only a nurturer, but she was a provider and protector as well. So she played a lot of roles, and I learned a lot from her. Especially looking back later as I grew up, I realized how hard she worked, and that has stayed with me because she really went above and beyond, and she gave me everything that I needed to succeed. I was certainly a troublemaker. The bad. We're on to the bad now.
I can't imagine you being a troublemaker.
I was an absolute wild child, and I can say that looking back now. I was a nightmare for my mother because she couldn't do a whole lot to stop me, especially as I got older into my teenage years. I struggled a lot with self-identity, who I was, and how I defined myself became one of these. Who can party the hardest kind of thing that you see a lot of young boys, especially in today's world. They identify with kind of like how many beers they can slug and how many women they can seduce into bed, and not really things that are of true masculinity. They're not learning to protect and to provide and to do great things. They're just sort of just aimlessly, just wandering about. And I did that for several years. And that actually culminated at the age of 19. I was involved in a motor vehicle accident that was entirely my fault. And it was a result of my reckless and carelessness, just sort of all across the board. And a young man passed away during that accident, and I wound up spending 6 years in prison for my recklessness and carelessness. And that was by far the absolute worst thing I've ever done. It was the hardest thing I've ever had to get through. The guilt associated with that is something that I still deal with on a daily basis. But in order to get past it and to be able to live my life, I had to deal with it in some way. And what I decided was I had taken enough from the world, and that if I was ever going to be able to function and to move past that, I had to work on being a better person. I had to work on being so good that I made up for some of the bad that I had caused and some of the pain and suffering that I had caused other people. And I spent 6 years in prison sort of relearning who I was. I read scripture, I read the Bible several times over, and I just read and wrote and thought a lot. There was a long time where I spent a lot of time in solitary confinement, and that was a very interesting experience, spending 6 months sort of learning who you are when there's nobody else to talk to. At first, the silence is almost deafening. A lot of people most people, especially today, don't spend a whole lot of time in silence with themselves. But it's a wonderful opportunity to really learn who you are, what makes you tick, what you're afraid of, what your goals are. And, those 6 years were by far the most transformative years of my life. And when I got the opportunity to come back out, I just wanted to make the world a better place. And I got into personal training because fitness was something that I anchored myself to during those tumultuous times in my life. It was a project that nobody could take from me, and it was something that for the first time in my life I really was learning to build something, and I was learning the value of hard work, and I was watching this project in front of me, which was my own body, kind of transform. And and I just wanted to apply that to the world around me. I wanted to share the benefits that had given me with other people, because it truly had saved my life. It gave me something constructive. And I started my own personal training company, and then years later, I opened Atilis Gym Belmar, which became known as Governor Murphy's favorite gym in New Jersey when we defied COVID restrictions by reopening our facility. And we got into the nastiest and just gnarliest legal battle with the state of New Jersey, Governor Murphy, and Judith Persicarelli at the Health Department in New Jersey, and by far it was the best thing we ever did. My business partner and I decided that we were going to open and that we weren't going to bend the knee at all. And we've been through 2 years of absolute mayhem, but it's the single-handedly the best thing I've ever done. We protected our community, we protected our families, and we protected our country by standing up to some pretty radically evil nonsense.
Wow. Amazing grace. Amazing grace.
Thank you.
And I heard, and I'm not sure if it was a rumor or not, have you made a decision now to run for a political office?
So yes, I have. So after 2 years of dealing with the nonsense of the political establishment, I made a decision a couple months ago. I didn't want to be on the defensive anymore. I didn't want to sit around and wait for the next, scam that these people try to pull, because we all know that there will be, they'll take another shot at complete and total control. And I didn't want to wait around for that anymore. And I felt like we did a phenomenal job at Atilis by holding our ground and not letting them close us down. They never successfully shut our doors once we reopened them. And, I just didn't want to sit and wait for the next thing. So I said, how do I go on the offensive? How do I use the tools that I have? And we've built a tremendous platform through COVID and through the things that we did at Atilis. We have about 500,000 followers on Instagram, and we have about 1 million all together of people who have supported us. And we learned that people can power some incredible movements when you bring them together and unite them behind a common cause. And made the decision last month to run for Congress in the state of New Jersey in the 3rd District against an incumbent Democrat named Andy Kim. And I made that decision when I realized that I didn't even know who my congressman was, because he's this mousy little guy who doesn't make any noise but just hammers down the line with Nancy Pelosi's votes and just furthers this radical agenda that we've seen in America. And he hasn't been challenged by anybody other than your establishment GOP people who, truthfully, I believe, at least in some parts of the country like New Jersey, these people are professional losers and they're not really fighting, that they're just trying hard enough to make you believe it, but they don't conserve anything. In the state of New Jersey, conservatives have not conserved a single thing in the past 30, 40 years. The only thing that's happened in New Jersey, it's gotten more expensive and harder to live there. It's gotten harder to do business there. Your rights have been infringed, and I'm tired of watching that happen, not only to my community, but communities around the country. So it's time to go on the offensive, and we're now in the primary, and we'll be heading into the general election in November, and we're going to bring that same tenacity and that same hard-headedness right into the halls of Congress, and we're going to make these people as uncomfortable as they've made us.
And that's only because you're just a little bit mousy. He's real mousy, and you're just a little mousy. So I have a question that
Sure.
I'm ignorant to, so I'm wondering if you can clarify it for my ignorance.
Sure.
So I thought when Americans have felonies, you can't run for office. Is that incorrect?
Certain offices.
Okay,
Congress is good to go.
So it doesn't
In fact,
matter.
I'm actually on probation right now for the heinous crime of
opening up.
of taking the doors off of the hinges so that they couldn't lock our doors. My business partner and I were sentenced to 1 year probation. So not only can you run with a felony, but you can run while you're on probation as well.
Wow, that's amazing.
That's something I learned.
That's a new one for me.
I might be the first congressman elected on probation.
Well, you know what blows? Can I say something that blows my mind
Yeah.
about the craziness in our country? Because I mean, there's so much good in our country.
There is.
So much more good than not. But I know of someone. Someone I know close to me, who had a felony when he was only 18 years old. That's it, and he's now in his 40s. For a real easy, I mean, a minor. What I call a minor.
Yeah.
He ended up taking. A friend told him that a credit card that he had belonged to him, and they could go shopping. And he bought items to realize it was
Yeah.
a stolen credit card, and
Fourth degree or something like that.
And so he felt guilty, and he returned the merchandise only to be on an FBI sting list, and then he got arrested, even though he was being
For doing the
honest
right thing, yeah.
in returning it. And so as a result, he's in his 40s. He's never been able to vote. So I find it interesting that if you've had a felony, you can't vote.
No, you can.
He was told he can't vote.
Somebody lied to him.
So he can vote.
He has to restore his voting privileges, but absolutely, they cannot take your right to vote.
So he's in Colorado. Does that stand firm anywhere?
That applies anywhere you go.
So what does he have to do?
I would
What do you do?
I would contact the Board of Elections and find the proper resources to get your voting rights restored. There's absolutely no way they can stop you from voting.
So your voting rights were restored even with your felony?
My voting rights were restored. That was the first thing I did when I got out.
Wow. I'm so glad we're talking because I didn't know that.
Yeah.
I
Yeah,
thought
and
they were still holding that.
They rely on that. They rely on people being told wrong information and then just kind of like accepting it for what it is and going about their lives. And now look, 30 years later, 20 years later, this guy still thinks that he can't vote when he could have and should have been voting this whole time.
Well, then why? Because I heard this with the crazies on the left, the crazies. I call them the crazies.
Yeah.
On the left. Then why were they saying things like we need to give everybody the right to vote that were felons? It was like they were going to just exonerate every felon so they could get more votes in the last election. So
they're looking for any way to cheat the system, and there's certain, I guess, from state to state and stuff like that. There's certain time periods that you have to go through to get your record expunged and stuff like that. But they're looking for votes wherever they can. But most of the time, the crazies don't even know what they're talking about. If you ask them simple questions, they really can't answer them.
So I guess the question, so in order to vote again, do you have to get your record expunged? Do you have to pay lawyer to get it expunged?
I think that varies state to state. In New Jersey, and again, I'm not an expert on it. I only know my experience in New Jersey. But when I successfully completed my time on parole after being incarcerated, my parole officer gave me that information on how to do it.
Wow.
And it was just a matter of sort of sending in a letter saying that your sentence had been completed and that you were now a free individual, and my voting rights were restored.
Wow, I'm really glad you shared that with me, so I'll definitely let this person know. So I just find it so fascinating to see how your life has evolved through living with a single mom, the pain and struggles that you went through. Was it in prison that you found Jesus, that you invited him in as your Lord and Savior, or
I certainly had the time to do so. It wasn't something that I had been adverse to, but it was something I ignored. And when you're alone for that long, I guess it kind of opens your heart, because you're not distracted by the nonsense of the world, and that's one place where you can no longer run from your problems. And when you realize you can't run, you start looking for real solutions.
And so you found God in prison. Now, I don't know this, so are you single, married, divorced?
Married.
Married, and you have children?
I have stepchildren, and we're working on one now.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. And you've stayed in this home. Now, is one of the reasons you stayed in this home that you lived in with your mom because of deep love and memories, or is that attachment that
No,
you have?
I love that we live in a small, little, quiet, sleepy town on the Delaware River in New Jersey, and it's our little slice of sanity in a insane place. We're sort of isolated from the rest of New Jersey. We're this little tiny river town. But also, one of the things I learned in prison was to live well below my means. And we live in a very, very humble little home. There's 3 of us there. That was something I wanted to keep because it kept our expenses really low, and it allowed me to do things like buy a gym at 35 years old, because I wasn't out spending money on things that were of no value. Our necessities, the overhead on our necessities were very low, and that was a lesson I learned when I was young. I really overextended myself, and I always found myself stressed out and working because I was pursuing instant gratification all the time, and my house wasn't in order. I didn't have freedom because I was a slave to always paying off bills and all this stuff, and it was all self-inflicted. And I realized that you can live very beautifully with very little, and that in fact not only is it smart financially, but it's really good to live like that mentally. Because you don't have a lot of baggage and you have much less stress, and when you don't have that clutter of the mind and of the spirit, there's a lot more room for really good things to grow.
Yeah, that's great. And is your mom still with us?
Yes, she is.
Does she live in the house with you?
No, she lives. She's actually getting ready to move to Florida. Her and her husband are. Husband's retired, and this is her last year, so they're down there enjoying the fruits of their many, many years of labor.
Wow. Now, did you ever have a relationship with your biological father?
Yes. Yeah, not a very good one, and I haven't spoke for years. Just not a very good one, and that's okay.
Yeah,
it doesn't always work out that way, and some people are very fortunate and they have 2 parents, or they have a dad that was there and a mom that wasn't. But you can't really focus on what you don't have, So I've always approached on the amazing things that I do have in my life, and when you adopt that attitude, you're not missing anything.
So I have one final question
Sure.
that I've been dying to ask of you since I've met you. Is this Samson? Is this part of Samson? I didn't know if I should touch it. Is this part of Samson? Like Samson had the long hair?
This just started.
Power? Does this give you power?
I think it does give me power. I think it does. I'm pretty sure it does. I won't shave it off, so we won't ever really know if it's a placebo effect or not.
As long as you keep Delilah away from you.
Yes. Yeah.
Delilah cannot come near you.
But yes, it's now become. I think if I ever needed to vanish, I could do it right in front of everybody, probably by just shaving my beard, and I don't think anybody would notice. So now that I'm considered a domestic terrorist for loving my country, maybe one day I'll have to shave and vanish into thin
I don't
air.
think any of us would know who you were.
No. I guarantee you wouldn't. I guarantee you wouldn't.
That's great. Well, could you give us like a website or way that people can connect with you?
Sure.
And if people, Spirit leads you to donate, because that's the scary one, is how to donate to your campaign without the government stealing your money again.
So they actually cannot touch campaign money. They still try to take our donations and stuff for the gym, but we're almost on the other side of that. A couple more months and we'll kind of be back in business operating. You can follow along on social media. My handle is Ian Smith Fitness, and that's IAN. That's on Instagram, Twitter, Truth Social, you name it, we're on it. So you can follow along with what's going on at Atilis Gym and our ongoing battles with that, as well as our congressional run updates. If you want to contribute to either one of those things, our congressional website is iansmithforcongress.com, and that's all spelled out, no numbers in there. And the gym website is theatilisgym.com, and Atilis is spelled Atilis.
And we'll have that on the YouTube channel after I post this and stream it for you.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you so much for joining us.
Absolutely.
Bless you.